What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Local Man is very pessimistic about the upcoming season for his favorite sports team. As always, I am your host, Zach Cronin, and today we're going to be talking about my Brooklyn Nets. We're going to be talking about what I expect from them throughout the 2023-2024 season. It's been a wild ride, to say the least. It was almost as if these last couple of Brooklyn Nets teams were a roller coaster that had no safety gear. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was bad, other times it was damn near fatal. And of course, this recent run of theirs culminated in the dissolution, the dissolving of the Kevin Durant, James Harden, and Kyrie Irving big three. All of them, of course, left at various points over the last couple of years. You have James Harden going to the Sixers, Kevin Durant going to the Phoenix Suns, and Kyrie Irving going to the Dallas Mavericks. Of course, not in that order. It started with James Harden, then Kyrie, which ultimately forced Kevin Durant's hand in requesting a trade. But the team is now rebuilding, and they seem to have a relatively clear understanding of how they want to conduct this rebuild. The front office, Sean Marks, ownership is more or less prepared to build around Mikal Bridges, pardon me. I keep calling him McCall for some reason. Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson. Of course, as we know, Mikal Bridges is coming off the best season of his young career upon coming over from the Phoenix Suns, averaged 26 points, 4.5 rebounds, a little bit under 3 assists, shot 47.5% from the field, 38% from three for Brooklyn in 27 games. Now, the first thing that I want to get out of the way is that I'm not projecting this team to be that great. I'm projecting for them to be a little bit above average, although the over-under numbers aren't out quite yet. Currently, Brooklyn's championship odds are plus 12,500, which puts them, if we compare it to last season, puts them on pace to win somewhere around 39, 40 games or so, which I think is about right. We have a lower tier team in Brooklyn right now who is not going to be among the worst teams in the Eastern Conference, but at the very worst is probably the ninth or 10th seed, and at the very best is maybe an eighth or a seventh seed. And all of this is reliant upon Ben Simmons. And what Ben Simmons are we going to get? I feel that Ben Simmons is probably not going to be able to replicate the success that he had in his early years in Philly. Unfortunately, I'm not really too optimistic on it. Maybe that's just a way of tempering my own expectations. But let's go ahead. Let's take a look at this young man's numbers last season. As we know, did not appear in very many games for this Brooklyn Nets team. It appeared in just 42, averaged 26.3 minutes, 7 boards, about 6 rebounds, and about 6 assists. Per 36 is at 9.5 points, 8.5 rebounds, 8 assists, 8.3 assists, pardon me, and 1.9 steals, which are actually on par with his career averages. There were shades and there were points of time throughout last season where we looked at Ben Simmons and we were like, this guy is back. This guy, although he may not be the downhill threat that he once was in Philadelphia, he is able to attack the glass. He is still a very reliable facilitator, and I think we're going to get similar levels of that this past season. But gone are the days of him being a very versatile forward. I don't think he's going to be a double-digit scorer for the rest of his career. If in the right system, he can still average 6, 7, 8 assists, which obviously he's shown. And at the very least, he's going to be an elite defender. I still believe that he has the tools, the athleticism, and the wanting to be an elite defender. Now, with all of that, you have Ben Simmons. We'll just take Ben Simmons is what I just described of him. Mikal Bridges, Cameron Johnson, Nick Claxton, Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal, who's on an expiring non-guaranteed contract. This team, I think, goes 39 and 43, if my math is correct. That is where I'm going to put them for this upcoming season, 39 and 43. If all goes well, and Mikal plays career basketball, Cameron Johnson plays career basketball, Ben Simmons plays career basketball, you get, the same level from Cam Thomas. This team could maybe creep into 43, 44, 45 wins. They might be around the Atlanta Hawks, but I think that it's more realistic that they're fighting with a team like Chicago, with a team like Indiana. During this offseason, of course, they went ahead, they added Dennis Smith Jr., they went ahead, they added Lonnie Walker as well. And while these two guys are solid young players, Dennis Smith Jr. in particular, and I don't even want to single out Dennis Smith Jr. for his improved play. Lonnie Walker had a great little run with the Lakers as well. While these two are hopefully going to contribute meaningful minutes to this Nets rotation, neither of them are really doing anything to elevate this team considerably. They're simply measures to add depth, and I think quality depth at that, especially at the guard position. DSJ has become an improved facilitator, has a better understanding of basketball at this point, which I think is great to see. I had a lot of optimism, a lot of hope for DSJ coming out of NC State, and Lonnie Walker, as I already mentioned, played quality minutes for the Lakers this last season throughout the playoffs as well. But what is the identity that this team is going to have? What is this identity that the franchise is going to try to form in the aftermath of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden, and as they begin this new rebuild? As you can tell, there is not a lot of offensive firepower on this team. Mikal Bridges is the go-to guy on offense. Cameron Johnson could maybe be a 16, 17, 18 points per game kind of guy, but beyond that, this is not going to be a team that is putting up 115 points consistently. First and foremost, from looking at this roster, if I'm Jacques Vaughn, I am prioritizing defense. You are going to have to be an elite defensive unit, and they already have a handful of elite defensive players. Nick Claxton in the middle, Ben Simmons, super versatile, great size, great athleticism, can guard 1 through 5. You have Mikal Bridges, once again, as well, a very solid two-way player. I know there are some folks that hate the phrase two-way player, but a legitimate playmaker on both offense and defense. You have Dorian Finney-Smith as well. Spencer Dinwiddie has become serviceable on defense. I don't think that he's all defensive caliber by any means, but once again, lots of size at the guard position. Still, it will be interesting to see how Jacques Vaughn deals with the bigger teams in the Eastern Conference, namely a team like Boston, who just acquired KP this offseason. Of course, you have Philadelphia, and of course, you have the Milwaukee Bucks with Joel Embiid and Giannis, respectively. How are they going to tackle all of that? Size is going to be very interesting. And also, of course, how they build this offense around Mikal Bridges. What is the type of philosophy that they have? Are they going to continue to perpetuate the kind of ball movement, player movement system that they tried to implement under Steve Nash, and that worked relatively well with the caliber of player they had? How is this team going to react when Bridges is double teamed, when Bridges is facing additional pressure? Who's going to be the guy who steps up and asserts himself as that secondary scorer, and sometimes even the primary scorer when Bridges isn't around? If I had to guess, that guy is going to be Cam Thomas. Cam Thomas's spot in the rotation has been very iffy under Jacques Vaughn. He appeared in just 57 games this past season, averaged 16 minutes per night, both of which were worse than his rookie season. However, Thomas was a much better player than he was during his rookie season. He cracked double digits this past season, had a run in which he averaged 35 points. Ladies and gentlemen, I fucking found it. For the month of February, this young man, Cam Thomas, averaged 23.5 points on 54% shooting from the field, and that includes 51% from three. Of course, highlighted by his 47-point performance against the Clippers, his 44-point performance against the Wizards, and his 43-point performance against the Phoenix Suns, all of which came back to back to back. So the spot is there for Cam Thomas to emerge as the potentially high teens, low 20s scorer that he has the talent to be. He's got a very robust perimeter game. He has the slasher mentality. Granted, not that great of a ball handler, not that athletic as well, but he's a crafty scorer. You can see it, even though he's a young guy. He just has a knack already for getting to his spots and converting, and that's something that you can't teach. Some guys either have it or they don't. They can learn it to a degree, but that's more of something that happens when they're closer to their prime, not when they're their second year in the league. Of course, we cannot talk about the Brooklyn Nets without talking about Nick Claxton, whom I thought should have been Defensive Player of the Year last season. Absolutely fantastic defensive campaign, 2.5 blocks, almost 10 rebounds, led the league in field goal percentage. This guy took a monstrous leap as a 23-year-old, and I'm expecting much of the same. Fearless defender, already has a great grasp on how to contest shots and how to alter shots without putting himself in foul trouble. I think that is the mark of an elite shot blocker, someone who can have a palpable impact on the game while remaining in the game. If you look at any of the premier defenders throughout the history of the NBA, at least after when they started recording personal fouls and started recording blocks, Dikembe Mutombo, Hakeem Olajuwon, the ratio of blocked shots per game to fouls per game is usually about the same, if not positive, towards the block slide. Nick Claxton averaged 12.5 blocks per game, as I just mentioned, but only 2.8 personal fouls. He more than doubled his rejections while keeping his fouls at about the same, which again is just something that you can teach to a degree, but also the player just has to have almost an innate understanding of it. And I think Nick Claxton has that. He is going into the season the second best player on the team, I feel like. And I feel that pretty comfortably. Looking at this roster, the hierarchy is pretty clearly defined in my eyes. You have Mikal Bridges, indisputably the best player on the team. You have Nick Claxton, second best player on the team, pretty comfortably. After that is where it gets a little murky. Spencer Dinwiddie could be the third guy. Cameron Johnson could be the third guy. Cam Thomas could be the third guy. Ben Simmons could potentially be the third guy as well, depending on how much of an impact he has outside of scoring. I do, however, feel that being able to get buckets for this team will be an invaluable asset for them, and I think it's more likely that Ben Simmons is the fourth or fifth best guy on the team. You have your hierarchy. Holy shit, I can't fucking say that word. You have your hierarchy clearly defined. And I feel when you have a younger team, when you have a rebuilding team, that is something that needs to be noticeable. Guys need to know their place in the pecking order. Otherwise, there is potentially a weird dynamic that could come up where guys are stepping out of line. Guys are taking shots from players who are more deserving and who are better. However, I do feel that doesn't really seem to be an issue with this team, at least the Nets in particular. Maybe I'm looking back on it through rose-colored glasses, but outside of, the superstar, outside of like the superstar dynamic, there really aren't many locker room issues that this team has had. And they really only even cropped up last year when Kyrie Irving and James Harden were relatively disgruntled. I think that, it does help entering a rebuild where you already have guys who are high quality, who are, respected in the locker room, and also have been around the block a little bit. And, it does kind of seem like everybody is closer to each other talent-wise because they are. I forgot where I saw the tweet or if this even was a real tweet or if I saw it on Reddit or something, but folks are talking about how the Brooklyn Nets have the clearest drop-off in talent of any team. And while I can't say that for certain, there is a mighty big drop-off after your top two guys, especially when it comes to the offensive side of the ball. I feel like a broken record talking about how dog shit this team's offense is going to be. But I don't want to harp on that too much because you don't need a scorching offense to be a good team. You do need an offense that could put up points to be a championship caliber team, but I will say this right now. If you are a Nets fan and you think that this team is going to come anywhere close to sniffing a championship, seek out help. If you are a friend of someone who is a Nets fan and your friend thinks that this team is anywhere near to being championship level, have an intervention with them because it is not true. This team could more likely be in the lottery than in the NBA Finals. What I'm about to say is definitely looking too far into the future and potentially speculating too much. And there have been talks. Well, I don't want to say, when I say there have been talks, I mean there have been people online who have been discussing this because there's nothing to talk about with the offseason outside of the FIBA World Cup. But there were rumors that Giannis will not re-sign long-term with the Bucks unless there is some sort of plan, unless they show that they're committed or something. You know what? Let me actually, so I don't look like a fucking stupid man. Giannis Antetokounmpo is under contract for 2 more years with the Milwaukee Bucks, but in the modern NBA, such a period is practically trivial. Antetokounmpo made it clear in a recent New York Times interview with Tanya Ganguly that he does not plan to sign an extension this offseason and that his goal is to win one more championship, even if that doesn't come in Milwaukee. Quote, winning a championship comes first, I don't want to be 20 years on the same team and don't win another championship. This is highly indicative of the era that we are in NBA basketball, and the old heads probably don't like it, but this is this is the reality. And of course, this stirred the pot tremendously. This was like not even stirring the pot, this was stirring the cauldron, I would say. Like the witches that oversee the NBA news cycle walked up to their boiling cauldron full of rumors and took the biggest fucking spoon they had and gave it three monster swirls because everyone was talking about their favorite team trading for Giannis. And of course, inevitably, Nets fans were talking about it as well. I do want to make it clear that this was Nets fans talking about it and really no one notable, at least from what I saw. Do the Nets have enough to trade for Giannis? And there is, of course, a world in which he lands in Brooklyn. There is a world in which he lands in New York. There is a world in which he lands with the Lakers, although these have varying degrees of rationality and possibility. The biggest discourse that I saw on it, at least when I was looking on Reddit, I know Reddit, but whatever. It's a great place to look for content. It truly is. And there were fans like, why would you want Giannis to win a championship after what he did to the team? And I'm like, bro, don't you want your favorite team to win a championship? Don't you want arguably the best player in the NBA to come and play for your team? Like, that's just a silly way to think about it. I am not going to really entertain this kind of discussion until next summer when we see what happens with the Milwaukee Bucks, because I feel that one more year in Milwaukee, regardless of what happens, will give us a clearer understanding of what Giannis wants to do. But I don't want to make this too Giannis centric because again, this is a video about the Brooklyn Nets, still is. Long story short, this is a team that has some potential to impress next season. Will be able to, potentially win a game or two against the better teams in the conference, but ultimately I feel that a comfortable spot for them is somewhere around like 39-43, 40-42, 41-41, and then depending on what kind of Ben Simmons we get, this team could maybe sneak into like 42, 43, maybe even 44 wins. If going off of last season is any sort of projection, post All-Star break, this was, of course, after they had already traded for Mikal Bridges and Cameron Johnson. Post All-Star break, the Nets went 11-13, which is a winning percentage of 45, I think, just about 46, which, of course, puts them on pace to win 39 to 40 games. It's not that, again, this was a bad team. It's just it's tough for them to compete in Eastern Conference that has become more competitive, especially nowadays when you have the Bucks and the Sixers, of course, and the Celtics and the Knicks are a better team, and you have the Raptors who probably will land around like a similar position that the Nets will be in. So I'm not getting my hopes up too high for it. I would bet 39 and 43. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and close this video out. Thank you guys so very much for coming to hang out with me today. As always, everything I'm associated with is down in the description box below. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a like on this video if you liked it. Leave a comment as well. It really helps out with the algorithm. And with that, I will catch y'all in the next one.